All right, so we are recording now. Okay, so the main point of last lecture is that for many problems in matching theory, we don't need to look at all the matching covered graphs. We just need to look at the bricks and braces. And one example is Pfaffian orientations, because one of the consequences of the theorem that we did not prove, um, you will be proving one direction on assignment 5. So easy direction on assignment 5. So good morning, Surya. Welcome to the last lecture.
Good morning, sir.
Right. So one of the consequences of this theorem is that a graph is non-Pfaffian if and only if at least one of its bricks and braces is non-Pfaffian. Or in other words, a graph is Pfaffian if and only if each of its bricks and braces is Pfaffian. Right? And the bricks and braces, as I mentioned, can be computed in polynomial time. So in that sense, we don't need to worry about all the matching covered graphs anymore. We just need to characterize the bricks and braces, right? If you can characterize the Pfaffian bricks and braces, then it would give you a characterization of all Pfaffian matching covered graphs. Okay. There is another comment I want to make, which is that, well, on assignment 4, you have been asked to prove that if G is a matching covered graph and C is a non-trivial, C is a tight cut, it doesn't have to be non-trivial, it doesn't matter, then each C contraction, well, sorry, I want it to be a bipartite matching covered graph, then each C contraction is also bipartite, right? And what does that mean? If you have a matching covered graph and you do the tight cut decomposition, it means that you will not get any bricks, because all the graphs will be bipartite. So the last graphs you get will also be bipartite. So consequence is that the tight cut decomposition, so I wanted to call it breakdown, but I'm just so used to decomposition that I cannot make myself use a different word. Okay, so the tight cut decomposition of a bipartite matching covered graph results in braces and no bricks. So just to give you an example, here is a tight cut decomposition of a bipartite matching covered graph, and this figure might actually be useful in on your assignment 4. But so here is an example. And I'm going to put these 3 edges going from the top left to the bottom right. Notice that this is a tight cut. In any perfect matching, you will have to use exactly one of the 3 edges going from the bottom left to the top top left to bottom right. Okay, so because 2 of these vertices, well, they have to match here with either this vertex or this vertex, then one of these 3 vertices will need to match to the other side, and then you can match the other vertices as you like. Okay, so notice that in any perfect matching, you will have to use exactly one of these 3 edges, right? And in this case, what do the tight cut contractions look like? Can anybody tell me what are the tight cut contractions for this cut C, the C contractions? What is it? K33, exactly. So in this particular case, both of the contractions will look are K33, right? So if this is X and this is X bar, then this is the graph G shrink X bar to a single vertex little x bar. Okay, good. So in this particular example, the 2 braces there are exactly two braces and they are both K33. Okay, when you do the tight cut decomposition, because K33 does not have any more non-trivial tight cuts. Okay, good. So that means that if you solve the problem for braces, if you solve the Pfaffian problem for braces, then you would solve it for all bipartite graphs. Right? So solving the problem for braces solves it for all bipartite matching covered graphs. Okay, great. Any questions or concerns regarding anything we have discussed so far? Right. Okay, on assignment 4, there are multiple characterizations of braces that you are required to prove on the last problem. I will just state one of the characterizations here in case anyone has not looked at the assignment. So one way to define a brace, so of course the definition we use is it's a bipartite matching covered graph that does not have any non-trivial tight cuts. Another definition of braces is the following. You take any two non-adjacent edges and there is a perfect matching containing these two edges. Okay, so a bipartite matching covered graph is a brace if and only if for any two E and F such that they are non-adjacent, of course, otherwise there cannot be a matching containing them. There exists a perfect matching containing both E and F, right? So in a matching covered graph, you have a perfect matching containing any edge. Braces have a stronger property. For any two non-adjacent edges, there is a perfect matching containing both of them. Okay, so that's one way to define a brace. Okay, good. So in order to solve the Pfaffian problem for bipartite graphs, we just need to solve it for braces. And that brings us to the main part of today's lecture. Again, we will not be proving anything. I just want to tell you about a theorem that is one of the deepest results in graph theory. And I will give you references in case you are interested in looking at the proofs. But they are really lengthy proofs. The difference between that and the four-color theorem is that I have read the proofs of these theorems. A four-color theorem, I have no idea. Okay, so let me just put down here Pfaffian braces. And the other difference is that one can actually teach these or cover these proofs in a course if one has 10-15 lectures. But four-color theorem is essentially not doable in a lecture or in a course. Right. All right. So the goal is to state a characterization of Pfaffian braces. Before we get started, are there any questions or concerns? Okay, so we already know Little's theorem. Let me just remind you of Little's theorem. A bipartite matching covered graph is Pfaffian if and only if, let's say I call this G, if and only if G does not have a conformal subgraph H that is a bisubdivision of K33. Okay, and I showed you an example which I want to draw again. This graph is actually okay, so I'm going to show you two examples that are very closely related and we have seen them before. So let's draw K33. Let's take a okay, that's a bit better. Let's take a bi-subdivision of K33. And now let's add a new vertex. One here and one on the other side. Okay, so this is a very famous graph called the Heawood graph. Okay, and I'm going to add one edge to this as I did earlier. Let me just add the edge E. Okay, so Heawood graph does not include the edge E. Okay, Heawood graph is a cubic graph, as you can see. So if I add the edge E, what I have is I have this in black color, the subgraph in black color is a bi-subdivision of K33, and it is conformal because when I delete the vertices, I will be left with a K2 which has a perfect matching, right? So that is a conformal subgraph. So this graph, Heawood plus one edge, is not Pfaffian. You can check that it's bipartite. Heawood plus one edge is not Pfaffian. Let me put the edge E. Right. So you add any edge joining a black vertex to a white vertex. It is a very symmetric graph. So you can add any such edge and you will get a non-Pfaffian bipartite graph. However, Heawood graph itself does not contain any conformal subgraph that is a bi-subdivision of K33. This needs a proof, which we are not proving right now. Okay. So Heawood graph itself is Pfaffian. So one edge makes the whole difference. And that is why it's a good illustration for Little's theorem. When you add that edge, the subgraph becomes conformal. Whereas without that edge, there is no conformal subgraph that is a bi-subdivision of K33. So it's Pfaffian. Okay? So is the content of this theorem clear? So this is a characterization of bipartite matching covered graphs. And therefore, instead of bipartite matching covered graphs, I can also write a brace because brace is a special type of bipartite matching covered graph. Also holds for braces. These are special bipartite matching covered graphs, right? Rather than always saying that the graph does not have a conformal subgraph that is a bi-subdivision of K33, I'm going to make it a bit shorter. I'm going to call these K33 free braces. Okay. So Pfaffian braces are the same as K33 free braces. By Little's theorem. Okay. And this was proved in 1975. And this theorem, as I mentioned earlier, gives a co-NP characterization for Pfaffian bipartite graphs. You can convince anyone that a bipartite graph is not Pfaffian by showing them this kind of a conformal subgraph, right? And they can verify in polynomial time efficiently, whatever, that this is indeed a conformal subgraph and it is a bi-subdivision of K33, right? The problem is it does not give you any way to convince someone that a bipartite graph is Pfaffian. So not Pfaffian, you can convince. How do you convince a person that the graph has a Pfaffian orientation? If you give them a Pfaffian orientation, then they have to check that all perfect matchings have the same sign, which is difficult because you could have exponentially many perfect matchings. Or they have to check that all conformal cycles are oddly oriented, which is also difficult because you can have exponentially many conformal cycles. Okay. So it's not easy to check that a brace is Pfaffian. So the main question for today's lecture is, how do you convince someone that a bipartite matching covered graph, in fact, I'm going to state for braces because we don't care about all graphs. How do you convince someone that a brace is Pfaffian? And turns out this has a beautiful answer. Not only that, this problem is related to multiple other problems in graph theory and mathematics. One of those problems, so for bipartite matching covered graphs, the problem is equivalent to a problem called Polya's permanent problem. I won't go into the details of this. I will give you a reference that you can read later. I will give you the gist of the problem. Polya in early 1900s had asked the question that if you have a skew symmetric 0-1 matrix, you want to compute the permanent of this matrix. So most of you, anyone who knows what the permanent of a matrix is? Anyone who has heard of the permanent of a matrix before? Okay, no problem. It's like determinant. The determinant has an expansion where the signs keep flipping. It's -1, +1. So you subtract something, you add something. So there is an expansion of the determinant where the signs keep flipping. Permanent is related to determinant, but the signs don't change. So this is related to determinant. So I'll just let you read more about it offline. So you want to compute this value for a matrix. The difference between the permanent and the determinant is that determinant can be computed easily by Gaussian elimination. Permanent, computing the permanent is important for several problems in mathematics and has applications to theoretical physics, etc. But it's not possible to compute the permanent efficiently unless P equals NP. Okay, so I'm not going into details here. So Polya had asked the question that if you have a skew symmetric matrix with only zeros and ones, and you want to compute the permanent of this matrix, we know that this is not doable easily. So Polya asks the following: can you flip some ones to -1s? So the matrix is 0, 1, but I am allowing you to flip some ones to -1s so that the permanent of the original matrix becomes equal to the determinant of the new matrix. Are there any questions? Okay, so that was Polya's question. So M is a skew symmetric, sorry, not skew symmetric, it will be skew symmetric. No, M is a symmetric 0-1 matrix. Okay, and we want to compute. So can we flip some ones to -1s and obtain a matrix M prime such that the determinant of M prime is equal to the permanent of M? And for which matrices is this possible, and for which matrices is this not possible? Turns out this is equivalent to deciding which bipartite graphs are Pfaffian and which ones are not Pfaffian. Okay, so that was Polya's problem in early 1900s. And turns out that it's equivalent to bipartite matching covered graphs being Pfaffian or not. Okay, so the only solution to this problem posed by Polya is apparently through graph theory. Until now, we don't know of any other solutions to Polya's problem. Okay, but again, our goal here is not Polya's problem. I just thought I should tell you about this historical relevance. So our goal is to understand Pfaffian braces, right? And by understanding them, we would also solve Polya's problem, skipping the details. Okay, so which braces are Pfaffian and which ones are not Pfaffian. So what are some examples of Pfaffian braces? Can anybody tell me? We have already seen two examples. Can you tell me what are those examples?
K33.
K33 is not Pfaffian, right? K33 is a non-Pfaffian graph,
Oh, yeah, got it.
right? But here is another example. Hewood is Pfaffian, right? So K33 is the smallest non-Pfaffian brace, but Hewood, the Hewood graph is a brace, and it is actually the smallest non-planar Pfaffian brace. Okay, so Hewood is one example, and it's actually a very important one, as we will see very soon. What is another class of Pfaffian braces? We have seen a class of graphs in the last few lectures. We also proved that this class of graphs is Pfaffian. Can someone remind me what is that class of graphs?
Planar.
Planar. All planar braces are Pfaffian. This is due to Castelline's theorem. Okay. What is an example of a planar brace, in case you are wondering? Well, it is the very famous cube graph. Okay, so cube is a planar brace. Okay, good. So then the question arises, what are the other Pfaffian braces? Sorry, I just need to quickly check my phone as I'm expecting something important to come. Okay. All right, so what are other Pfaffian braces? And I'll give you an example of a Pfaffian brace which can be constructed from 3 cube graphs. So I'm going to take 3 cubes, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to identify them on a 4 cycle. Okay, so I will take this 4 cycle and I will identify 3 cubes on that. What do I mean by that? Let me, so this is my 1 4 cycle. My first cube is going to be in red color along with the black color. So the red with the black is 1 cube. Then I'm going to put another cube and identify it on the black cycle. So this is my green colored graph along with the black colored graph. And then I'm going to put a third cube. The reason I'm putting 3 of them together is because if I put just 2 of them, you can draw it in a planar fashion. You can easily see that I can draw the green square outside the black square and I will get a planar drawing. But now when I put the third cube, this is a non-planar graph. You can find a subdivision of K33 in this. This graph turns out it is a Pfaffian graph. It's actually called, well, I need to do one more thing. So this is a Pfaffian. So let me just use black again. This is a Pfaffian non-planar brace. Okay. It is the smallest Pfaffian non-planar brace as far as number of vertices is concerned, except for the Hewood graph. Hewood graph has 14 vertices. This graph here has 16 vertices. But you can make it even smaller in terms of the number of edges. What you can do is you can now remove the black colored edges of the original 4 cycle. So what you can do is you can take planar braces, you can identify them on a 4 cycle, but then you are allowed to throw away the edges of the 4 cycle. Okay, or you can keep any subset. You can keep one of these 4 edges if you like. It's not a problem. Okay. And if you do this, you will get a bipartite graph. It's not difficult to see that the graph is going to be bipartite. Okay. So this graph is obtained by taking a 4 sum, or maybe I'll call it a 4 cycle sum. It's clearer what's going on. By taking a 4 cycle sum of 3 cubes. Okay, so I'm not going to write down the formal definition, right? But you get the idea. You have 3 braces, and maybe I'll write it down. So this is the graph G. So G can be written as G1 union G2 union G3, and the intersection of G1, G2, and G3 so I'm taking the union of 3 graphs, and then their intersection is a common C4. Okay. So you can think of G as the graph with the 4 edges. And you can think of G prime as the graph obtained from G minus any of the edges of the 4 cycle. Okay, so you can remove any 4 edges of the black 4 cycle. Common C4. So this is your cycle C. And G prime is G minus F, where F is any subset of the edges of the 4 cycle. Okay, so is the definition clear? And G1, G2, G3 are all planar braces. G1, G2, G3. Oh, sorry. You can actually generalize it. You can take any Pfaffian braces and you can stick them in this manner to get another Pfaffian brace. Okay, so for the smallest examples, of course, you will take planar braces and stick them. But now you can take this Pfaffian brace, you can take 3 copies of this and stick them again, and you will get a Pfaffian brace. Okay. Any questions or concerns? Also, you might ask why 3 copies? Well, actually, you can take 2 copies or 4 copies. It doesn't matter. The reason we are taking 3 copies is so that we avoid examples which are planar. So, for example, this graph can be thought of as a 4 sum of 2 cubes, but we are not taking 3 cubes. We're just taking 2 of them, right? But this is still planar. So the reason to take 3 of them at a time is because you will get non-planar examples. You will not get any corner cases where you can get planar graphs, and 3 is sufficient. So there is no reason to take more than 3 at a time. You can first add 3 braces, then you could add 2 more to it. So 3 is just the number which makes the theorem work very nicely. Okay. So 3 braces is just a technicality. I wouldn't worry too much about that. Okay. But the main idea is that you can take braces and stick them on a common 4 cycle, and that will give you Pfaffian braces. Okay. So the theorem I want to tell you is that this is all of the Pfaffian braces. Either you have the Heawood graph, or you have a planar brace, or you have a non-planar brace. But in that case, you have to be able to write the non-planar brace as a 4 sum of 3 Pfaffian braces. So the third example is non-planar braces that can be expressed as a 4 sum or a 4 cycle sum of 3 Pfaffian braces. So it is recursive. You can construct non-planar Pfaffian braces using the four-sum operation, and then using those braces, you can keep constructing more and more such examples, right? So it is an infinite class. The main point is that the four-cycle sum operation captures the Pfaffian property for all braces. The only exception is the Heawood graph. The Heawood graph needs special treatment. Okay, and this is the theorem of Robertson, Seymour, Thomas, 1999, and McQuaig, 2006. These are all the Pfaffian braces. Right? So what is easy to show is that all of these braces are Pfaffian. What is difficult to show is that all the Pfaffian braces belong to this set. That's the difficult part. Okay? So let me state it again. Brace is Pfaffian if and only if either G is Heawood, G is planar, or G may be expressed as a four-cycle sum of three Pfaffian braces. As I said, this direction is easy, relatively, and this direction is, well, I will just say it's very difficult to prove. Right? Okay, any questions or concerns regarding the theorem statement? I can tell you a few things about the proof in case you're curious. But I just wanted to tell you about this statement to bring a closure to the whole Pfaffian orientations topic. So this you can regard as the deepest result out there in Pfaffian orientations and one of the deepest results in matching theory for sure, right? And in most of graph theory, right? So the paper of Robertson, Seymour, Thomas, just to actually appeared in the Annals of Mathematics, which is very rare. It's very rare for combinatorics and graph theory papers to be published in the Annals of Mathematics because there's a lot of prejudice, to be honest. But this paper was actually published in the Annals of Mathematics, partly because, as I told you, it solves Polya's permanent problem, which is an algebraic problem from early 1900s. And this is the only solution to this problem so far, right? Completely graph theoretical. McQuaig's paper came a few years later, and it appeared in the Electronic Journal of Combinatorics. McQuaig's paper is really nice because in his in the first 3-4 sections of his paper, he explains some 10 to 15 different equivalent formulations of Pfaffian orientations, some of which came up in theoretical physics, some which came up with chemistry. He also explains the connection with Polya's problem. So he also gives the algebraic, he also explains the algebraic side of things and connects it with graph theory. And then the rest of the 40, 50 pages of his paper is devoted to proving the theorem, right? So, and the reason I really like this theorem is because it has a special graph. Like those are the theorems which I think are some of the coolest theorems in graph theory, where Heawood graph or the Peterson graph in many cases, or some other graphs play a special role. Right? Good. Any questions or concerns regarding the content of this theorem? Is anything not clear? Okay. So, I mean, to be honest, I can conclude the theorem here, and unless anyone is interested in knowing how this theorem is proved. So please tell me if you're interested, then I'll say a few more things. But otherwise, I'll just conclude the lecture here.
A few more things.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, okay.
Yes.
So you would like to know a little bit more. So between these two proofs, Robertson, Seymour Thomas, and McQuaig, the one I can actually say a few words about is McQuaig's proof. I have read the Robertson, Seymour Thomas proof. It is shorter, maybe, but it is, in my opinion, a lot more lacking in intuition. Like, it's not clear how the authors had these ideas. They are all correct, great, but it leaves this feeling of, magic, which basically means that you don't understand. McQuaig's proof is much more intuitive. So I'll tell you a few words about McQuaig's proof. So McQuaig proves it by induction, right? I think in spirit, even the Robertson Seymour Thomas proof is by induction. So it's a proof by induction on the number of edges of the graph. So how do you prove such a theorem by induction? Well, I will tell you about one of your writing exercises. So what you did in your writing exercise is you used the Tut's wheel theorem to prove something about all three connected intercyclic graphs. So recall writing exercise 1. Well, there is only one. You use the Tut's wheel theorem, which is a generation theorem for three connected graphs. And you use this to obtain a characterization of three connected intercyclic graphs. Intercyclic means that any two cycles share a vertex. Okay, so if you solve the writing exercise, you would remember this quite clearly. So McQuaig's proof is similar in spirit. He uses a generation theorem for braces, which he proved himself in 2001, I believe, or it was published in 2001. And he takes this generation theorem and tries to understand braces by using this generation theorem. So first, McQuaig proved in 2001 a generation theorem for simple braces, right? Because a graph is Pfaffian if and only if the underlying simple graph is Pfaffian. In fact, here also, Tut's wheel theorem was for simple three connected graphs, right? So he proved a generation theorem and then uses this theorem as an induction tool. And he also uses Little's theorem. So rather than showing that a graph is non-Pfaffian, he will often find a K33 in the graph. So, right? So he uses, so this is one of the tools. The second tool is Little's theorem. So he finds a K33. So whenever a brace is not Pfaffian, he's going to find, right, whenever a brace is not a four cycle sum of smaller braces, smaller Pfaffian braces, in all those cases, he goes and finds the K33, conformal K33 by subdivision. He finds a conformal K33 by subdivision in any brace that does not belong to the family. So what do I mean by the family? By the family, I mean all of these braces, right? So that's the general idea behind McQuaig's proof. And maybe I will tell you a little bit about his induction tool. Okay, so basically, I'll tell you about the forward direction where you do it as a generation theorem. So, what he proved is that you can generate all the simple braces from a certain family of braces by doing some operations. Okay, so think of it as Tutt's wheel theorem. Tutt's wheel theorem says that you can generate any simple three connected graph from a wheel either by adding edges or splitting vertices. Okay, so that's similar to McQuaig's theorem. So he has four operations. No, there are three operations. My bad. Three operations. The first one is you add an edge between a black vertex and a white vertex, of course, right? You want to maintain the bipartiteness. The second operation is it looks like this. You take a vertex of degree 4 or more, and then you split it into three vertices. Remember, in matching theory, you have to maintain parity. So if you're going to replace one vertex, you have to replace it by an odd number of vertices, right? So you replace the vertex V by three vertices, V0, let me call this 0, V0, V1, and V2. And you split all the edges on V between V1 and V2. And then you add, this is a degree 2 vertex, which is not possible in a brace. Braces are three connected. You can check that easily. So then you add one more edge here to any arbitrary vertex of the graph. Okay, so if this is a black vertex, then these two will be black. This is going to be a white vertex, and you make it adjacent to any arbitrary black vertex of the graph. So you will get a bipartite graph. Okay, this is a second operation. And the third operation, which is actually one of the most important operations in his proof, it is where all the fun happens. You take a white vertex of degree 4 or more, you take a black vertex of degree 4 or more, so 4 or more, 4 or more, and now you do a similar thing as before. So you split the vertex U into U1, U0, U2. You split the vertex V into, let me not color right now, into V1, V2, and V0. So if this is a white vertex, then U1 and U2 will be white, U0 will be a black vertex. V is a black vertex, so then I'll make V1 and V2 black vertices. And I will add, all the edges will be split between U1, U2, and V1, V2. There are some other considerations you have to make so that you don't get some crazy stuff like degree of vertex 2 or something. But I won't go into those technical details. And then you make U0 and V0 adjacent. So there is a new edge in every case. Okay, so either you add an edge E between a black vertex and a white vertex, or you do this kind of expansion of one vertex, and then you add a special edge E. I will tell you why this edge E is important. Or you split two vertices, one black vertex and one white vertex, and then you add a special edge E. Okay? And what McQuaig proves is that using these three operations, you can generate all the simple braces in the world starting from a certain family of braces. So these three operations, so maybe I'll tell you McQuaig's theorem. All simple braces may be generated from, so I'll tell you what these braces are. There is a set of simple braces using the above three operations. He calls these expansion operations. Okay, so these are the expansion operations. So what are these simple braces? So this is like the wheel theorem, right? All simple three connected graphs can be generated from the wheels by either by adding edges or splitting vertices. So instead of the wheels, we are going to have some braces here. They are called the prisms, Mobius ladders, And instead of the wheels, we have biwheels. So what are these graphs? I'll just tell you quickly. So a prism looks like this. You take a graph like this and you add these two edges. If you do this on so this has to be 4k vertices, because if you do 4k plus 2, you will get a non-bipartite graph. What are Mobius ladders? Mobius ladders are, the smallest Mobius ladder is k33. So you need to have 4k plus 2 vertices, because if you have 4k vertices, then the graph will be non-bipartite. Okay. And what are the biwheels? Well, biwheels are beautiful. They are what you think they are. Take an even cycle and put a white vertex inside, join it to all the black vertices, put a black vertex inside, join it to all the white, outside, and join it to all the white vertices. So these are the biwheels. And these can have any number of even number of vertices. Right? It is clear that these are bipartite. Whether it's 4k or 4k plus 2, they are always bipartite. So what McQuaig is saying is that you can always take a prism, a Mobius ladder, or a biwheel, and you can do these three operations, a sequence of three operations, and you will always generate simple braces. Right? So I hope I don't need to expand this further. I hope it's clear. So for any simple brace G, you will get a sequence G0, G1, G2 up to GR, and GR will be your last graph G. G0 will be a prism, Mobius ladder, or a biwheel. And for every graph here, you will obtain it from the previous graph by doing one of the three expansion operations. Okay? Good. And all of these braces will be simple braces. Okay? So McQuaig uses this theorem as an induction tool to prove his main theorem, which is the characterization of Pfaffian braces. Right? And whenever he wants to show that a graph is non-Pfaffian, he will just find a k33 inside the graph. So a conformal bisubdivision of k33. Right? And that is how he uses Little's theorem to prove that a brace is non-Pfaffian. Right? So these are the main ingredients of McQuaig's proof. And the rest is a whole lot of case analysis, because you have to consider all the three operations, and then you have to consider different possibilities, and it's a lot of work. Right? Any other questions or concerns? So I didn't tell you the relevance of this edge E, but it basically helps you in going in the reverse direction. So what you do is you remove the edge E, and then if you get any vertex of degree 2, then you contract the two edges incident at that vertex. And that is the reverse operation. So you remove an edge, and whenever you get degree 2 vertices, you contract both the edges at that vertex. So another way to say McQuaig's theorem is that every simple brace, except for prisms, Mobius ladders, and biwheels, it has an edge, so that when you delete the edge and when you contract the edges incident with the degree 2 vertices, you will get a smaller simple brace. So that is in the reverse direction, right? But I stated the generation direction. Okay. So I think this is the end. There is not much else I want to say. We are already over time. Are there any questions or concerns? If not, I will stop recording and we will just have a 5-minute informal discussion. Right. So formally, this is the end of the lectures, and I'll stop recording now. Okay.